You know, when Reverend Sean asked me to speak, I knew I would need to give her a talk title about a week or so in advance. And so the Friday after elections, I was sitting there going, what do I want to talk about? And, you know, what was coming up for me in that moment was that I was really feeling like I was on this roller coaster ride. You know, the things that we go to Magic Mountain to go up and down and left and right. And sometimes it takes us to the right when we think we're going to the left. And then there's always the loop-de-loops, you know? And I kind of felt that that was the way my life was going at that particular moment. And so today's talk title is Gratefully Balancing Your Life. And gratefully is obviously a nod to Thanksgiving. This is a time in our lives to be grateful and to count our blessings. But I'm going to be focusing in today on balance. And how do we balance our lives? And in particular, how do we balance our emotional lives? How do we get to a place where, you know, sometimes we have a lot of roller coaster ride type of things going on, and maybe we feel like we've been on the roller coaster for months. Nobody wants to live on a roller coaster, right? And we want to get back to a balance, a place where we can just be and be graceful in our lives. Now, when we're not balanced, I think what happens is it's the result of having kind of an inner conflict going on. And Dr. Ernest Holmes, he says, on that subject, he says, the subjective side of thought, being the seat of memory, often retains thoughts and suppressed emotions which more or less tear or bind. This is what is meant by inner conflict. So what he's saying, the subjective mind, that's our subconscious mind or unconscious mind, and it's also more, right? It's everybody's unconscious mind, everybody's subjective mind all tied together. And it's also that place where when we think our thoughts, we teach in religious science that as we think those thoughts, that they go into the creative process, into the law, and they show up in our lives. And so when we have these suppressed thoughts, when we have these emotions that are putting us into conflict, the problem is that, you know, there's the conflict that's out there, but if we don't get into balance, then what happens is that our life, we start creating conflict in our lives too. So we want to be in a place where we can release our inner conflicts, come into emotional balance, and have a conflict-free life. So I want to read you a quote, and see if you recognize this one. If you do, let me know after I finish. It goes like this. Come writers and critics who prophesize with your pen, and keep your eyes wide, the chance won't come again. And don't speak too soon, for the wheel's still in spin, and there's no telling who that it's naming. For the loser now will be later to win, for the times they are a-changing. Anybody recognize that?
Bob Dylan.
Bob Dylan, exactly. The times they are a-changing. And the thing that struck me, I was listening to that song this week, and the thing that struck me was that it sounded so modern. It sounded like, you know, it should be written and sung for this day right here, right now. And I started thinking about that and going, well, gee, it's not from today. That's a song by Bob Dylan that's from 1963.
Wow.
And I was thinking about that and going, you know, the issue is that when we have these events happen in our lives that take us off balance, one of the things that tends to happen is that we start to think that nothing's going to change again. Right? That whatever is going on in this moment right now, that is what's going to happen for eternity now. But the truth is as we look back on our lives As we look back to 1963 and the stuff that was going on then, well, it changed. Between 1963, it goes in cycles. Things change. And so rather than being stuck, where when we are stuck, when we feel like we're stuck, what that means is we put that stuckness into the mind that God is again, and we create a life that's stuck. So rather than being stuck, we want to find balance, and I think that one of the ways of finding true emotional balance in our life is to know that this too will pass. And so I'm going to call that the first law of balance. Mary mentioned that I'm a physicist. So I have a tendency to think in those types of terms, to think of things as laws. So it might be the law according to Scott. Nobody's written this down to me that I know of anyway. So the first law of balance is this too will pass. And the second law of balance then is everything is relative. Now what I mean by that is that humans are relative creatures. And Herman Melville, I think, put it very well. He said, to enjoy bodily warmth, some small part of you must be cold. For there is no quality in this world that is not what it is merely by contrast. So in our lives, what that's saying is that we have to experience a whole gamut of emotions in our lives in order to appreciate the ones that we want to appreciate, want to really know. We have a tendency to want to know love a lot in our life, but I think we need to look at the opposites in order to really, truly experience that love. So for instance, in my life, I'm a parent of 3. 2 of my boys, they're all boys, and 2 of my boys are all grown up, so I don't have to worry about raising them anymore. They're doing their own thing now. But my youngest son is 15 years old. And so I'm still in the midst of raising that last one up through his teenage years, which is always, it can be fun, it can be challenging. But one of the things that I'm always thinking about as a parent is how much should I allow him to fail? And the truth is I, as a parent, we all parent a little differently, and believe me, I think there's lots and lots and lots of ways to raise children. But for me, I've always believed that I need to allow my kids to fail a little bit. Not so much that they're over here shoved off the edge of the world, right? Not that kind of failure. But little failures, allow them to fail a little bit, because if they don't ever fail, they don't appreciate the successes that they have in their life. They don't appreciate what they need to do really to succeed, because they've always just succeeded, right? They've always had people just buoying them up to make sure that they succeed. But if they have a little bit of taste of failure, then they really appreciate the side of success. And it makes them strive, or at least that's what I've seen with my kids, it makes them strive a little bit more. So we can say that about our emotions too. Can I feel joy without sorrow? Can I feel elation without a little bit of worry? Can I feel love without dislike? Now, the thing I'm definitely not saying is don't go over to the dislike and live there, right? What I'm saying is allow those emotions, because they do come up for us. We're human beings. We're relative people. Allow it to come through. Let it go. But allow that to teach us a lesson about what love really is. So when we live in that relative as balance, then what we're saying is we recognize both sides of the emotions and we choose to live in the middle. So that's the second law. So we have the first one, this too will pass. The second one, everything is relative. And now the third law of balance is let it go and move on. So Albert Einstein said, he's one of my favorite people. You know, as a physicist, I just love Albert. He said, life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. And I love bicycle riding. I got a bicycle story for you. 9 years ago, the summer that I adopted my youngest one, he was 6 years old when we adopted him, I did the AIDS ride. And that's a 565-mile ride from San Francisco to Los Angeles in 7 days. And you can do the math, but I'll do it for you. It averages 80 miles a day of bike riding. And some of the days are over 100 miles because they take the Wednesday, the middle of the week, to let you recover a little bit, and you only ride about 40 miles. And one of those days, the Tuesday of the ride, we started on Sunday. The Tuesday of the ride, we were out in the middle of this flat farmland. And there we were with fields on either side on these country roads where the speed limit on those roads is about 55 miles an hour. The cars just go whizzing by. And what I realized, I was riding with two of my friends, so it was the three of us riding in a straight line, going down the road, having a good time, but we had a really significant crosswind, meaning that instead of blowing in our face or pushing us along behind, it was blowing us to the side. And it was coming from my right, and so I recognized after a while of riding behind my two friends that they were riding like this. Because it was about 20 miles an hour. It was a good blow. And you have to ride, kind of leaned over, or you'll end up riding out into the road. And that was okay. You got used to it. We got used to it. But there would be these trucks that would go by us. And we would have these hay trucks that would come up. And as they came up and they were right next to us, well, they would block the wind. And so instead of being like this, you all of a sudden had to kind of come up to the middle. Until they went past. And then the wind off of the truck, which was blowing the opposite way, would mean that we had to lean over the other way. And then, of course, it's turbulent, so you're really at the end, you're kind of going like this, And to make it worse, we had the hay coming off the truck, kind of hitting us in the face. Now, the hay trucks just kept coming. It was hay truck after hay truck. And about the fourth time a hay truck came by, my friend that was in the front, Chris, she just started to scream. It was, until the truck went by. But looking back on that now, I think that she did exactly the right thing. Because she had obviously built up a bunch of anxiety about these hay trucks going by, and being tossed around in the wind and everything, and worry about landing in the ditch, all that type of stuff. And so what she was doing was she was allowing all of that energy that had built up inside of her to come on out. And that's the release part. That's the let it go part. And I think when we do that, we find our balance again. But the other thing that she did was she didn't slow down. She kept on pedaling. And as a physicist, I really appreciate that, because your bicycle wheels, when they're moving at a good speed, they act like a gyroscope. They actually help keep you balanced. So if she had slowed down with all that wind and turbulence going around, she might have actually tipped over. But moving along and keeping moving, keeping going, keeping the gyroscope going, she was able to stay up. And so I think that that's what we need to recall, that we can find our balance, we can let go of whatever is inside of us, find that balance, And when we are at that place of balance, then we get to be at a place of choice. And Viktor Frankl says in Man's Search for Meaning, he says, everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. To choose one's own way. And that's what we teach in religious science. We teach that we are always a choice, that we get to define the life that we're going to live. It doesn't come for free, but it doesn't cost anything. We get to decide where we're going to create from and how we're going to create in our lives. And when we do that, when we make that choice to be balanced, we get a balanced life. So this too will pass, was number one. Number two, everything is relative. Number three, let it go and move on. And the fourth and last one is, I think, the most important one, which is align yourself with God. Align yourself with the principles that God is. That's what I'm saying. Align yourself with the love and the peace and the joy that God is. Now, sometimes, when I'm feeling particularly unbalanced, it can be hard to get to that place. What I need at that point is I need to have something that acts like a circuit breaker, to turn the crazy off. And one thing that I found for me that works really well to just get the crazy to shut off so that I can have that moment to get back into alignment with God, to get balanced, is awe. Go find that place within you that brings you in awe of God again. The first time I can think back to being in awe, I was always a little scientist as a kid. And I remember being about 8 years old, laying on a field, looking up at the sky, and thinking about the infinite nature of the universe. Knowing that no matter how far I went in that direction, there was always farther to go. And I remember that as an 8-year-old bringing me to awe. But there are other ways for me to get there. If I go to the beach, I can be in awe. Or I go into nature, I can be in awe. Or I can go and look at a flower and be in awe. Scratch my dog's ear. Anything that takes and short circuits the crazy for a moment in your life, that's all you need. Just a few seconds of sanity to ground yourself back in this place of balance. The other way to align yourself with God is what we teach all the time, prayer. Right? We teach in religious science a 5-step treatment methodology where the first 2 steps really ground you back in and align you with God. The first step is to know God is all there is. And the second step is to know that that's the truth of you too. And what we're knowing that God is all there is we're knowing that it's those principles of love and peace and joy. And that I'm that too. So prayer will always bring you back there. And Dr. Ernest Holmes says, when prayer removes distrust and doubt and enters the field of mental certainty, it becomes faith, and the universe is built on faith. So we just need to allow that prayer to get rid of the mistrust and the doubt. And I don't know about you, but when I'm feeling unbalanced, that's often a cause. Is I'm feeling mistrust or I'm feeling doubt on the way things are going to go. So if I can go into prayer, and I can remove the distrust and the doubt, and I can come to a place of faith in my life, a place where I know I am the life and the power and the presence of God is, then I know that everything's all right, and I will get back to balance. And then the last is gratitude. Here we are, coming up on Thanksgiving, and as was so nice, so wonderfully mentioned, and the song by Margaret was so nice, reminding us to be grateful. And gratitude has that way of bringing us back into alignment with God. And all we need to do to be grateful is really just notice something, anything in our life this moment. And I think we can always find something. I can always be grateful for my children. Or my granddaughter. There's always something that we can be grateful for. And as we are grateful, as I am grateful, I know that I align myself naturally back to God. So those are the 4 laws of balance. And so I just encourage you as you come along over the next week. You're coming up on Thanksgiving, which is sometimes a day that we need a little extra balance. So, I offer you these laws of balance as you start up your Thanksgiving day. No matter how your Thanksgiving is going, whether it is wonderful or maybe it's got its downsides wherever you are, just remember, this too will pass. And then sometimes at Thanksgiving we have interesting relatives. So we get to remember that everything is relative. It takes the good, the bad, all to make up a family, all to keep us in balance. And then let it go and move on. However it's showing up, we can always just let whatever's feeling be felt, let it go, and keep baking the turkey.
You might not want to scream the way it is.
True. Yeah, that might be a good way.
Or you might.
And then always, there's a time for prayer at Thanksgiving. And just gives you an opportunity to align yourself with God, to be grateful, and to find your balance. Thank you. Namaste. So I'm just going to come down here with you guys for the prayer. So we're just going to take a moment to ground ourselves in this message by knowing the truth that God is. And so I just drop down inside of me to that place that knows that it knows that it knows. I drop down inside of me to that place that touches the infinite at the very core of my being. I drop down inside of myself to that place that listens to that still small voice. I drop down inside of myself to that place that knows the power and the presence that God is, as the love, as the peace, as the joy, everything that we know, everything that we touch is God, and yet God is so much more. It's so much more than all of that. And as that's the truth of God, I know it to be the truth of myself. I know it to be the truth of this congregation. I know it to be the truth of the world and beyond. That this life and this power and this presence of God is, that it reaches out and touches us as we reach out and touch it. We can never be separated from it. We can never be apart. That life that we create in this moment, as in all moments, is the love and the peace and the joy that we are. that we have so much to be grateful for. That life is living itself as us and through us. As we come upon this day that's known as Thanksgiving, as we live in a community that's going through change, as we live in a world that sometimes seems to go a little roller coastery, that it's always got the life and the power and the presence that God is behind it, creating out of the order that it is, creating out of the love that it is, creating out of the balance and the peace and the joy that it is. And so however it is showing up in our lives in this moment, I know that the truth of it is that it is all good. Back behind it all is the wholeness that God is our lives. And for knowing those truths today, I just give thanks. I drop down inside of myself to that place that can be grateful. Grateful for what I know right now, for what I see right now, for what I am right now. And I release this prayer into the law, knowing that it's already fulfilled in the mind that God is, and I say life and God are good and very good. And together we say, and so it is.